Welcome back, everyone, to the Homo Complexus podcast with your host, Richard. What you're going to be listening to today is a really fascinating discussion that I had the privilege of having with the host, fellow podcasting host, of something called the Age of Napoleon podcast, which is truly an exceptional piece of work. The author of this podcast, who I had the privilege of chatting to, called Everett Rummage, is truly brilliant guy. He's been doing it for 10 years, complete encyclopedia of knowledge on the Napoleonic era, not just in Europe, but its repercussions all around the world. So I really hope you enjoy this discussion that we have together. So without further ado, let's cut straight to that. Hello, Everett. Can you hear me?
Hey, Richard, how's it going?
Oh, wow. This is amazing. Thank you so much. Sorry I took a bit longer than I thought. I'm sitting here in my living room, so I always have to quickly set it up into something that looks respectable.
Oh, no problem at all. It's, doing these guest appearances, there's always at least someone, either it's me or the host. Someone always has to, someone's late, someone has some technical problem. It always happens.
Well, yeah, I don't want to make it a habit. I would love to know how you got into this line of work, because how old are you at the moment? Are you in your 30s, early 30s?
39.
Late 30s? Oh, looking like early 30s, but
well, thank you.
And are you in what part of the US are you at the moment?
Believe it or not, I'm actually surrounded by Australians right now because I'm in Seattle, where the national team's about to play.
Wow. Is that... Because I think that's 5 a.m. our time. Is that when is that for you? I'm trying to think when that...
That I think is at noon tomorrow.
Noon tomorrow, okay, yeah. Are you going to be out and about for that?
No, I actually went to the game, the last game in Seattle, which was Egypt versus Belgium.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I'm way behind, so I've got to catch up on my real work.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. What's your day job now?
I just do the show. That's
sick.
my only job.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it.
Goals, man. I wish. And when did you start doing it?
Coming up on 10 years now.
Wow.
I started 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So you were 29 then. I'm 26 now. It leaves me a bit of wiggle room still. And are you what did you study at uni? What was your background to get into it? Because I just read a little bit on your... I didn't go full stalker mode, but I saw you were very interested in French stuff from a young age when you went and got lost somewhere in France, in Paris or something, and then you did some European history study at some point, right?
Yeah, I actually my original study focus was international affairs, modern diplomacy.
Yeah.
Found I didn't really care. That's you do that if you want to get into the foreign service or CIA or something, which I definitely did not want to do. So I was kind of what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Changed my focus to European history. And then I actually did journalism for a while after college. And I think that a lot of what I do, I feel is related to stuff that I learned doing journalism.
Oh, sick. Did you, what publications or stuff did you work for?
Oh, nothing big. I didn't say I was a successful journalist. I said I was a journalist. But I did a lot of work in kind of little local news outlets. Wrote for my college newspaper.
Yeah.
You don't have to. A lot of it's about learning how to write, learning how to edit, learning how to turn stuff around quick. That's all stuff I learned doing journalism.
Yeah, I'm considering. I'm sort of tossed between two things where I either start journalism next year or do a secondary teaching thing. So we'll see. I don't know what the job prospects are like for journalism nowadays. But let's get to the area of focus. So that show you've been doing for 10 years, is it still the Age of Napoleon one? Are there different ones now? I haven't
Nope.
gone through to see how many episodes there are now, but they're all. I can imagine you can do like your whole life just on Napoleonic Europe. So, yeah.
Yeah, people sometimes think that like oh, well, don't you run out of material? And it's like, no, actually, I could be doing this much longer. I wind up cutting out a lot more than I actually end up using.
Yeah.
It's just such a rich period of history. So many characters, so many little side stories.
Yeah.
I mean, you really could do this forever.
You could, yeah, and you still wouldn't like probably scratch the surface even, because if you like fully flesh out all the characters, that could take like a whole lifetime. I don't know how many books have been like written on Napoleon, but probably like hundreds, thousands, different ones. So where did the Napoleon like fascination come from? Is it literally from getting lost somewhere in a Parisian museum as a child?
I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah.
I lived there when I was a child. Both of my parents are very into. My mom's side of the family actually is French. My dad's side of the family, it's just I think part of it's that my grandfather was a soldier there in World War II.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so my dad kind of grew up with French stuff kind of in the house.
Yeah.
So he was always really interested in French history. My parents met in a French class.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I just kind of I kind of grew up with just kind of feeling that connection to France. And then when I was there as a little kid, I kind of got interested in Napoleon.
Yeah.
And I think Napoleon is one of those figures where once you're interested in him and kind of you have that in the back of your mind, you start to see him everywhere. Just because he's so influential and so present in popular culture that once you kind of start seeing him, you never stop, and it just kind of sticks with you. And, I've been through many, like a lot of people who are interested in history, I go through periods of being interested in this or that, and kind of no matter what you're reading about, eventually Napoleon will come up.
That's really funny you say that, because I know like almost nothing about Napoleon as like someone. 26-year-old, grew up between South Africa in Cape Town and East Coast Australia, very sheltered upbringing, and we never like talk about Napoleon really in like Australian schools. It's all just Captain Cook coming to Australia and British history and stuff. But I've been like going down the Indian history like rabbit hole, especially like British colonial era, but before that as well, and like. Yeah, lo and behold, Napoleonic generals were like fighting in India as well against the British. So yeah, he really is everywhere. When like, I just know he was born on like Corsica or something, right? The island near Sardinia.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. And then so like, how did he go from there to? So you just give me his like childhood story as best you sort of know.
Well,
what's the deal?
Very briefly. He was born right after. There'd been a long period before his birth where Corsica had been theoretically controlled by Genoa, an Italian city-state, but the Corsicans had been rebelling against Genoa and had sort of de facto set up their own state, and were kind of running the island themselves, even though legally Genoa was still in charge. Yeah. Napoleon's parents were very involved with the guy who was the big Corsican independence leader, a guy named Pasquale Paoli, who was sort of like Napoleon, and Napoleon grew up idolizing this guy, and you look at what he became as an adult, and it's like, well, he was sort of following in his idol's footsteps.
Yeah. Is that guy an Italian? It's sort of seen. No, he's Corsican, but he's got like not a French sounding name, right?
Well, that's the funny thing about Corsica is it's French, and today Corsicans, generally speaking, feel like a part of France.
Yeah.
But it's got this very strong Italian influence. Their language is very close to Italian. Their culture is very close to Italian. Napoleon actually grew up when he would read books as a child. Yeah. They were all in Italian.
Okay.
He had to go to when he went to France to go to school. He had to take like a crash course in French.
Yeah.
So the Corsicans are sort of an Italian/French people. They're very kind of got one foot in each country.
Yeah, like many of those like Mediterranean islands, they sort of have an identity crisis all the time.
Yes.
And then, so he follows in the footsteps of this like Corsican independence leader. When does he go to France for schooling as like a child?
9 years old.
Okay. And
imagine that, leaving home at 9.
Yeah, that's like very alien to most people now.
And he's in France all of a sudden. He got a spot. His father, depending on who you ask, made an accommodation with the new government because he wanted to be part of Corsican affairs, or sold out his former comrades in the independence movement to kiss up to the French.
Yeah.
But in any case, his father became quite an important person on Corsica, and that enabled him to go to this special military academy where he got a sort of rough but extremely influential on his future life education, and learned French, picked up kind of French culture and customs, and had this kind of, as you mentioned, identity crisis, because he idolized this guy who had fought against the French and had fought for Corsican independence. And now he's training to be a French officer, but he still has this kind of nostalgic, patriotic feeling for his home. So his early life, he's very torn between France and Corsica. And there's a real tension there. I mean, he became commissioned a French officer, and still had these sort of patriotic, independent sympathies. Very strange situation.
Yeah, well, I think often this is a very like sweeping generalization, but I feel like often the people who end up like, I don't know, that stick in the memory, that like do sweeping change and stuff, are not like from a very like homogeneous, like stereotypical background. They often have like strange stuff going on in their childhood. I don't know if that's true at all. I just get that feeling.
I think that's absolutely true. People who have some kind of outsider perspective, but also have the insider access. That sort of seems to be, like you said, a formula for a lot of people who kind of do big things, make change.
Yeah, it's strange. So when does, like, how old is he when the whole like French Revolution kicks off, and they like, I don't even really, you'll have to run me through quickly what the French Revolution is, because like my entire consciousness about that is from like Les Mis, which I don't even think is from like that particular period in time. So it's really, really hazy for me. But it's like 1789 or something. Is that the date?
Basically, the French government, they'd had, you think of like Louis XIV.
Yeah.
Couple 150 years or so in the past, France had been kind of the big dog of Europe, and they were sort of at the forefront of everything. Had a very, effective government, very modern government, and then just kind of things stopped going well for France, and so so you have this period where the country's kind of in decline relative to the other great powers.
Is that the 7 Years' War? Sorry to interrupt. Is that like
7 Years' War is a big part of that?
Yeah.
And they're defeated by the Prussians, upstart. New great power. And so the French are kind of asking themselves, what the hell happened? It seemed like we were sort of on the forefront. And then, all of a sudden now we're facing a country in decline, and kind of what's the matter? And so there's this, intellectuals are asking these questions. In the meantime, the royal government is so incompetent, it's starting to like literally run out of money.
Yeah.
And people are increasingly unwilling to lend them more, because it's like, the debt just keeps growing and growing. The tax revenue isn't going up.
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing? And so there's pressure mounting, and there's, unrest related to hunger, and kind of just generally how poorly run the country was. Things, just sort of seem to be spinning out of control. There's no sort of one reason, but like just things are going very badly. And the king is under all this pressure, and so he decides, under pressure from mostly people who he owes money to call the Estates General, which is sort of like the Parliament in Britain, but kind of has unique French aspects to it. And once the Estates General meets, all of a sudden there's kind of a new force on the political scene. Because they, are trying to assert their power like a parliament would. Yeah. And the king is trying to hold on to his power, and, things are still getting worse in the country. There's a really bad famine at this time, so there's, that pressure is continuing to mount. And so before long, you get a power struggle between sort of the more radical elements of the Estates General and the king, and that's the revolution, this struggle between the estates and the king, which, goes through many twists and turns and takes on many dimensions. But, really it's about the forces of the old order, the king, the church, the aristocracy against kind of the rising middle class, the sort of Enlightenment sympathizers among the nobility, and the clergy in some cases.
Yeah.
And that becomes, this sort of an ideological struggle more than a political struggle. And, but then the Bastille falls, and you've got kind of the stereotypical image of the French Revolution.
Yeah. What's the guy's, like, someone whose surname starts with R, right?
Robespierre.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah, man, that's terrible that I forgot that. Is there like a particular thing that sparks it, that like people go back? Oftentimes this stuff is like kind of incorrect, but is there like something that people would say, oh yeah, that was like the moment where like all the violence started? Because they say 1789, like what was
Yeah, and specifically it's the 14th of July 1789, which is, it's actually kind of ironic. There's this news spreading around Paris that the king is about to basically clamp down on the assembly.
Yeah.
Which is not actually true. He was not planning on doing that day, but these rumors are spreading. And so the people of Paris are kind of freaking out, thinking, they mostly supported the estates.
Uh-huh.
So they're thinking, we got to stop this somehow. And so they sort of rise up, and the only kind of royal stronghold within the city was this old, it had formerly been a fortress. By this period, it's like more of like a prison / armory / just kind of general, administrative building. And the crowd stormed it and took it over. And there was actual, there was like a short gun battle between the crowd and the garrison. So that's kind of that's the first time. Well, the first time there's really prominent violence in this conflict, and not only prominent violence, but prominent violence inside Paris.
Yeah. Okay. And Paris by that point already had like long history of being the seat of where the king's palace and stuff was, right? Like I'm always hazy on the French.
Well, that's the funny thing is that, yes, Paris was full of royal palaces, but by this point the royal family lived at Versailles, which is outside Paris.
Yeah.
And actually part of what the crowd wanted was for the royal family to move back to Paris, because that way they would be kind of among the people and, like at least in theory, like more accountable to the populace. Not in Versailles. Part of the point was that they were like, it's the middle of nowhere. They don't have to worry about anybody. There's an army around them. It's mostly in forest. It was a hunting lodge originally. Okay. So you don't have to worry about, the crowds coming, because it's like, a day's walk from Paris.
Sounds like, something waiting to happen there. And then so that all goes down. Napoleon is like, again, this is sort of hazy in my memory. There's the monarchy gets toppled, and then sort of soon afterwards, decade or so afterwards, Napoleon is in charge. Like, how does that all? Is that right? Like, how does that all work? How does Napoleon?
There was a lot of, the once they topple the monarchy.
Yeah.
It's really hard to just kind of build a government out of nothing.
Impossible.
Where does your legitimacy come from? Where does kind of the rules of the game come from? It's all, you have to make it all up on the fly, and then, everybody has to agree to it, which of course never happens. And so there was all this political instability during the revolution, where once they got rid of the king, they just could not agree on how to move forward. And they had a really hard time, because the legitimacy of the government was so weak, they felt like they couldn't accept dissent. And so whenever someone disagrees, it's like, let's kill this guy, or let's beat these people up. And so there's all these coups, and there's a civil war at one point, and it's just constant instability. Around the end of the 1790s, they start to kind of sort of restore stability, but the government is like super corrupt, super unpopular, not very effective. And so these politicians start plotting, let's overthrow the government and not like do anything really radical, but let's just kind of try to put a more normal system in place so that we can kind of get along with business. And these politicians need soldiers for their coup. I mean, it's a coup, obviously. You need someone holding the guns. And so they involve Napoleon, because he's a famous general at this point, who, young, dynamic, really popular with the public. And once they get Napoleon involved, he's one of these characters. He just kind of takes over everything. You give him an inch, he takes a mile.
Yeah.
So once he's involved in the coup, all of a sudden it's Napoleon's coup, and these politicians are kind of, cast off to the side. And then once he gets power, he's very effective at sort of consolidating it. At this point, the French people and the French elite especially are very sick of all the constant upheaval.
Yeah.
And so Napoleon looks like a guy who can bring stability without giving up on all of the good aspects of the revolution.
Yeah.
And so that seems like a great bargain to a lot of people in France. Hey, we have done some good things over these last 10 years. We want stability, but we don't want to throw out all this good stuff just to, get the king back and be back where we started. And so Napoleon kind of seems like the best of both worlds. You get like the stability that you had under the monarchy, but with all this new stuff that had been brought in by the revolution. And so he is very quickly able to consolidate his rule over France.
And where did he cut his teeth on his so he went to military school, learnt French and stuff as a child, 9-year-old. And then how old is he when the governor, the new coup people want to recruit him? Is he in his 20s?
That's in his 20s, yeah. So he's still very young.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of young generals because the old generals all quit the army because of the revolution. And so you have this weird situation where they're kind of scrambling to find leaders, and they eventually are able to, guys who are mostly in their 20s and 30s rise to the top of the French military.
And he was involved in some of the fighting and stuff in those turbulent years before, which is where he got his experience, all in France, right?
Yes. Probably most famously, he fought this campaign, which they still teach in military academies today, called the First Italian Campaign.
Yeah.
Where he's got this, it's like a kind of a sideshow of the main war is in Germany, but there's this kind of secondary front in Italy. And so the government just kind of gives Napoleon, this army is basically like cast-offs that they, thought that they couldn't use in Germany. Very few men, not much equipment, and they're basically not expecting him to succeed.
Yeah.
They're thinking, hey, he'll keep the bad guys busy down there for a while, and that'll be good for us.
Yeah.
But Napoleon fights his way all the way through central Italy and all the way up into Austria and ends the war pretty much, him and his army did it alone, basically, with hardly any resources. It's a pretty amazing accomplishment. And that's why he has the prestige to, be involved in this coup, because he is seen by people as, the man who won the war.
Have you seen that Napoleon movie with Joaquin Phoenix?
I have, yeah.
Is it did I just miss that? Did they show that well? Because I didn't get his portrayal in that movie is at least my impression was that he's kind of insane, and it wasn't a glowing portrayal of him at all. And I get that he's complicated and stuff, but yeah, I feel they sort of did him dirty a bit with the movie. What was your impression of that?
Yeah, I agree completely. I felt parts of it almost felt like a caricature, you see those old cartoons making fun of him, and that's sort of it. It almost seemed like that at some point. There were some good elements to it, but I thought that they didn't do a very good job showing. By the end of the movie, when they show him returning from exile, it's why would the audience? Why wouldn't they just shoot him? You've seen nothing about, why people in France liked him or why he was so successful. He just seems like this kind of tortured weirdo.
Yeah. With a weird
I thought
sex
it was a
life
bit,
and everything. Yeah, it was very strange.
Yeah, and the sexual stuff was all made up too. It was very
Really?
odd that they felt the need to do that.
Yeah. That's really weird, because I saw Joaquin Phoenix is starring. I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. And then it was, in my eyes, a bit of a flop. But yeah, that's Hollywood for you most of the time. So because I know there's because he's so famous and he's talked about so much, especially from, his enemies a lot of the time. And English, French is not the dominant language in the world. It's English. So I feel we get pretty bad points of view about anyone that's not British. What are sort of the biggest misconceptions? I just remember from the very start of your series, you were he probably wasn't a tiny bloke. So that's number one.
Yeah.
The fact that he's this tiny, and that's from, you were saying it's from a misunderstanding of like the French le petit général, right? Which is like not saying you're tiny. It's just like a term of endearment, which is classic, British misunderstanding everything. But what are some of the other things that are just completely wrong? So the sexual life stuff, probably not right either.
Yeah, I mean, he had a kind of crazy sex and romance life, but not in the way you see in the movie. Okay. I mean, he just had, he was a 19th century French guy. He had a lot of mistresses and stuff, and had a very sort of sad and turbulent marriage to Josephine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions about her as well. She was a pretty impressive person, but in a lot of histories, she gets treated as this sort of like, frivolous, sort of frivolous woman who was bringing Napoleon down. And you actually look at their relationship, and it was a lot more complicated than that. And she was pretty formidable.
Yeah.
As for Napoleon himself, I feel like portrayals of him tend to be either hero or villain.
Yeah.
Which, you look at him up close, and it's like, he did a lot of good things and a lot of really horrible things, and it's like, it's really a much more complicated picture than hero or villain.
Yeah.
I also, I think people see him, as this sort of, there's this idea that he was like this mad conqueror who like loved bloodshed.
That's actually what I think. Yeah, that's the image I get.
And I think that again, you can criticize him, I think, for relying too much on war and the military and his foreign policy. But this idea that he was like this, like, oh, I just love war and I love killing people is just really not in his character. I mean, for one thing, he, after a battle, would get this like wave of like remorse and would go out on the battlefield with his doctors, and they would like help the wounded, like him personally.
Wow.
And he would like, give people, I mean, imagine like, you're like dazed from a head injury and some guy's handing you water and you're like, what the heck, is that Napoleon? So he again, much more complicated picture than the caricature you get.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the, maybe I'm biased because I've spent so much time studying him, but that to me, that's kind of the theme of, a lot of misconceptions of him kind of portray him in a simple, in a simplified way. And you look at him up close, and he's a very complicated and in some ways almost kind of a tortured character because, he's, in one way, he's this man of the Enlightenment, kind of thinking about the future, almost a progressive figure in some ways. Mm-hmm. But, he's a dictator and, is really, in some ways, a force of oppression, especially by the end of his career.
Yeah.
But he still weirdly had these ideals that were sort of liberatory almost.
Yeah.
You've got a guy who probably did more to, when he came in on the scene, Jewish Europeans were like second-class citizens, but worse than second-class citizens. I mean, they had no civil rights a lot of places. Yeah. It was really a horrible, comparable like to Jim Crow in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And Napoleon came in, and he was strongly opposed to that, and he took the lead in getting rid of all those legal restrictions on the Jews in Europe. And then on the same token, this is a guy who tried to bring back slavery in the French colonies. So it's like, that shows you the dichotomy of this guy, where in some ways he can be this progressive force who's fighting for a just cause, and then he's also, trying to bring back slavery after they'd already gotten rid of it. That's really low.
Yeah. Also, I always thought the British go on about this all the time, how they like ended it first. Is that right? So the French,
no,
it's wrong, right? So that. Maybe they're like, oh, Napoleon tried to bring it back, so we were first. So, tell me about that. When did the French like stop slavery in the colonies?
Well, that was the radical period of the Revolution. These guys were, liberals, and they didn't believe in slavery. Yeah. And there were all these. It's actually very interesting to read the debates. People think, oh, that was a different time, and no one understood. And it's like, well, you go back and read the debates, there were actually quite a lot of people who were pointing out the horrors of slavery in a way that is quite comprehensible to us. And not only black people, I should add. There were plenty of white people involved in these arguments. And these left-wing factions controlled the legislature, and they banned slavery.
Way before the
And
British.
it,
Okay.
yeah, although they did try to bring it back.
Yeah.
So I guess that's not a totally nice story, but
No.
they did ban it first. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, it sounds like they were having the discussions at least in like a meaningful way, and then changed it like first. I'm sure people in like Britain and other places as well, if you spoke to like an isolated clergyman or just some random guy on the street, could have been against it, but whatever. Could we do like a bit more on Josephine, because that really piqued my interest, like, and that'll
Yeah.
also mean we don't just talk about like this general. He's a lot more than that, obviously, but yeah. So tell me about Josephine. Like, where does she come from? How do they meet? Like, what's the deal with her?
Well, she came from the West Indies. Speaking of the colonies,
Okay. Wow. Okay.
and she came to France. I mean, so her parents were plantation owners in the West Indies and were, for a time, extremely successful. Then their plantation was destroyed in a hurricane, and they didn't have the capital to rebuild. And so they all of a sudden have to face, not being rich anymore.
Yeah.
And so they have 2 daughters, and they decide, okay, our next business plan is to have our daughters marry rich guys. And so they basically devoted themselves to raising sort of young gentlewomen who would be appealing to a rich guy.
Yeah.
So Josephine had this very weird childhood where her parents were basically grooming her, from when she was very young. And then she's in her early teens. Her sister is successful and gets older sister, gets a rich guy to propose to her. Actually, the son of the governor, big deal in the West Indies.
In the Western second.
And unfortunately for the family, the sister dies of a disease before they can get married. So the family just passes Josephine, I think only 14 years old at this point, to be married to this guy.
Okay.
So she gets shipped off to France
Yeah.
at that very early age, basically on her own.
Yeah.
She gets there, she finds that her new husband basically is like, I like the single life. I don't want to be married. You're a drag. I don't want you here. And is pretty horrible to her, abusive, makes it quite clear that he does not want her around. So she has this, she's alone in this, effectively a strange country. She was a French citizen subject, obviously.
Yeah.
And so she kind of had to claw her way through life. Her husband got executed during the Terror.
Okay.
She was slated for execution herself during the Terror.
Yeah.
And escaped because the government got overthrown the day before she was supposed to be executed.
Okay.
And one of her close friends was a mistress of one of the leaders of the coup. And it's actually been speculated that she was in her man's ear saying, you better pull this off quick, because if my friend gets killed because you get cold feet, I'm gonna be really pissed.
I really want that to be true. That's funny. Yeah.
And then she's a mistress to various politicians.
Yeah.
It seems, being that close to being executed, she kind of got this idea, I got to be close to whoever's in power,
Yeah. Fair enough.
because so that they won't come after me.
Yeah.
She winds up a mistress to this guy, Paul Barra, who was like a ultra corrupt, really just weasel of a politician.
Yeah.
And she's his mistress for a while. He basically gets sick of her, but according to sort of the etiquette of the time, you're really not supposed to dump your mistress.
Okay.
Because the idea is she's sort of ruining her marriage prospects by being with you.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of not cool to just sort of dump her
Yeah.
unless she's engaged. And so he's trying to get all of these people he knows to propose to her, and he eventually gets one of his clients, young General Napoleon,
Okay.
on the hook, and he's kind of interested in her, and so Barra sort of engineers these two getting together. Not a very romantic story at all. And at first, actually, Josephine was not really interested in Napoleon and kind of married him because she was forced to.
Yeah.
But in spite of that, she actually had an affair very publicly with a guy while he was off fighting that first Italian campaign.
Okay, yeah.
Which he eventually found out about and was furious about. But in spite of all the infidelity and kind of the like just bizarre origins of their marriage, they had this really good relationship, and she helped him a lot in his sort of, today we'd call it public relations. You know, he was this kind of severe character, but Josephine was this really sweet, warm, empathetic person, and so she was kind of the the human face on his regime. People loved Josephine. Even people who hated Napoleon loved Josephine.
Wow. And did she write down like a biography, or does any of her stuff survive?
No, she did not write an autobiography. She died suddenly, relatively young, and most of her letters were destroyed. So we actually don't know a ton like from her. We mostly have accounts about her.
Yeah.
But she was really influential in like kind of culture and style, and was just one of these people who, I mean, she must have had some magnetism. People were really drawn to her.
Because I always find like, I feel like just because we're patriarchally built up, we always have these great, I don't know, Alexander the Great, whatever, all these like Napoleon, these generals that like we talk about, and then we forget that like most of them were like not single and went home a lot of the time, not on campaign and stuff obviously, but they like had to confide in someone. Like they either had a best male friend or like there was always like the other forces behind these people, because it sounds like she would have known him probably the best like in his life, right? Or is there other people you think?
No, I agree completely. I think no one knew him better than Josephine, and actually that's why, because he did eventually divorce her because she couldn't have children. Well, she had children from a previous marriage, but she was older than him, and he was always away on campaign earlier in their marriage. And so, by the time they really got serious about trying to have a kid, she was like in her early 40s, and medicine being what it was back then, they couldn't do it. And a lot of people say that you kind of notice a decline in Napoleon after the divorce.
Almost certainly for that reason. I don't think it's that complicated.
I mean it's to me it's funny because people kind of try to deny it, but to me it's like it clear as a bell that this was, I mean, you even read Napoleon's own letters. He talks about how I can't do anything without Josephine supporting me.
So it really seems like the sense I'm getting is Napoleon was this not very good at PR, but like very good strategically and like whatever you call it, he had like a vision or whatever, but she was sort of holding him together, at least for in a lot of ways, and then he sort of deteriorates afterwards. Is that sort of inaccurate? Okay. And then like how does, because I get sort of, I'm trying to be empathetic to Napoleon. I know like my opinion of him is going to be like vastly different after this conversation, because I just knew nothing. But so I get that he like inherits a fractured France and then does like the unification stuff, or like militarily does some stuff. So, but why does he then like go and conquer a bunch of like Europe? Is that just like normal at the time? Like what's the...
Well, he actually, a lot of these wars are not started by Napoleon.
Okay,
The French, even when the French are actually on the offensive during this period, they always see what they're doing as fundamentally defensive. During the Revolution, basically all of Europe attacked them.
I'm sure.
And it was frankly a miracle that they not only held them off, but actually went on to win that war. I mean, it's an absolutely incredible story just from a purely, military strategy standpoint.
And that was all him, right? But, like in the Italy.
Well, I mean, a lot of people did their part, but Napoleon was the one who landed that killing blow to end the war, make the Austrians surrender. But because of that event, I think the French always perceive the other European powers as against them. And so even if they're at peace, it's like, okay, these other countries are just building up so they can attack us in the future. And that's actually true in a lot of cases. The Austrians, after they're defeated at Austerlitz, quite literally are saying, okay, well, it'll take us how many years to rebuild our army and attack France again? Basically at this time, these European governments are becoming so much more powerful. The 18th century was this time of just, huge growth in, military power, efficiency of governments, efficiency even of the finance system, which, of course, goes to the war because that's how you finance a war, by borrowing money. So these states have become not only France and Britain, but Russia and Prussia and Austria, and even some of the smaller countries have become really powerful and have these really, crack professional armies.
Yeah.
And their interests are kind of right up against each other. And so they always feel like, in a lot of cases, they literally share borders with each other.
Yeah.
And it's like at any moment they could just come over and attack us. And so there's this feeling of Europe just being a powder keg. It's like, a pond where the fish have gotten too big and they've started to fight each other. And it's just kind of, France is the big dog. And so they all kind of have an incentive to try to take the French down.
Yeah.
And the French have this, the French are aware of this. And so they have this feeling of, we got to get them before they get us, because we can't let them all gang up on us again the way they did in the 1790s.
Yeah.
So it's really, why did Napoleon conquer all these places? Well, a lot of cases, these places attacked him.
Yeah,
so he came in and said, all right, if you want to keep attacking me, I'm going to, install my own government that'll be friendly to me. But of course you do that, and then of course the neighbors of those new annexed places all of a sudden have France on their doorstep with this radical new system that they don't want in their countries. So it's just kind of a never-ending cycle of violence and different powers attacking each other. And so, yes, Napoleon is partially responsible for it. The British are partially responsible for it. The Russians are definitely partially responsible for it. They're all playing their role in this crisis.
Yeah. No, okay. That's definitely won me over, because I was just, I don't know, I had this image as him just like as a Hitler figure or someone just going out and for no apparent reason doing it. But yeah, they're all attacking him. That makes complete sense to me. What was I going to ask next? I think it was going to be about the colonies, because I tangentially
you cut out at the beginning there.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to go back to like some of the colony stuff now, because I knew a bit of like Toussaint Louverture's story, and then I only right at the end, like Napoleon comes in and like shafts him, or does some nice things. But yeah, because so just if we move like off of mainland Europe and Haiti, like Saint-Domingue especially, like what was like Napoleon's role essentially in suppressing like the Haitian revolution? Or was he sort of, what was his view on it?
Well, so Haiti, you've got all of the turmoil of the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Because Haiti is a colony of France, they have that same turmoil.
Yeah.
Within the white population, where some of the white settlers support the revolution, some of the white settlers support the king, and so they're kind of at loggerheads. Meanwhile, the black population, who are mostly but not exclusively enslaved, are reading about, the peasants in France have rights now. Oh, in France now everyone's legally equal. And they're thinking, well, that certainly applies to our situation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so they start and meanwhile they're also seeing that the white population is very preoccupied with their struggles amongst themselves.
Yeah.
They're actually fighting in some cases and trying, arresting each other. And so the black population is saying, hey, things are changing clearly.
Yeah.
There's new ideas in the air. Our enemies, the people who've had their boots on our necks for as long as this place has existed, are divided and weak. Mm-hmm. So they start planning an uprising that launches lots of twists and turns. There's other countries getting involved at different points, but essentially the dust all settles, and the people in charge are a faction of the Haitian rebel movement who have sort of joined forces with the French revolutionaries.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and so it's this sort of this army has white and black officers. It's got the government they set up is a racially integrated government, and Toussaint Louverture, who's the leader presiding over all of this, has sort of created this fusion politics that are like part African, part French radical, part Catholic humanist, really just kind of a mix of different influences that speaks to the people of Haiti. Yeah. And, you'd think that, this is just a horribly divided society in so many ways, and yet this guy seems to be able to hold it together.
Yeah.
He writes a letter to Napoleon essentially saying, look, I'm in charge here. I'm the only one who can hold this together. I would ask you to appoint me governor of this place and kind of let me run it in your name.
Okay.
And Napoleon writes a letter accepting this proposal, but then has second thoughts, never sends the letter, and instead decides he's going to crack down and institute direct rule from Paris on Haiti. No autonomy, no kind of unique system for that can exist in the colony. They're gonna he wants French-born Frenchmen in charge, calling the shots. Basically, and there's some pragmatism there. He had been an abolitionist as a young man.
Okay. Yeah.
But he's in a position now where he has to either accept this sort of new, very radical experiment, or he's got to pivot all the way the other direction and kind of accept the former planters, the former enslavers. Yeah. And so he is at a crossroads and he picks the slavers. And the French campaign in Haiti is probably the most brutal fighting of this period.
Okay.
The officer he sends over dies very quickly of disease, as often happens with white officers in this part of the world. And the guy who replaces him is a psychopath. I mean, the stuff that this guy did to people is things that I would not repeat on a podcast. And so the Haitians fight this just horrible, bloody war against the French, and eventually win and achieve their independence. And without Haiti, sort of none of Napoleon's grander ambitions for restarting the French colonial empire are possible, because Haiti needs to be the cash cow for all this stuff to work. So he subsequently sells the Louisiana Territory to the USA, cutting bait on what was supposed to be kind of the big French new settlement in the New World, and that's when he focuses. He never totally abandons this idea that France will regain its colonial empire, but really after the loss of Haiti and the sale of Louisiana, he's pretty much exclusively focused on Europe.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. And then, because I had forgotten, I knew this, but I'd forgotten that Louverture had to do his own essentially version of the French Revolution in Haiti, and then I had forgotten about the French crackdown and the fact that they won again in that. And then obviously he eventually, because he's buried somewhere in France now. Toussaint.
Yeah, well, when they first began to resist the French, when the French came as hostiles, in the second phase of the Haitian War of Independence, Louverture fought them basically to a draw.
Okay.
They have a negotiated peace, like a ceasefire, and then the French basically tricked him into giving himself up and being arrested. And they brought him back to France and locked him in a freezing cold jail cell until he died, basically. It's not a very nice story, and that's why he's buried in France, unfortunately. I don't know if he still is.
Wasn't that Napoleon's brother who went over at one point?
It was his brother-in-law.
Oh, brother-in-law. Okay, yeah.
That was the officer who died very early. Was a guy named Leclerc, who was married to Napoleon's sister.
Yeah, really, really weird. And so he also goes to Egypt, right? Napoleon.
Yes, that was so between the first Italian campaign, when he wins his original fame, and when he takes power in France. There's this weird, it's like a little side story where he's in Egypt. And actually fought his way all the way up through Egypt and then up into modern Syria, Palestine, Jordan, that area. They got very far. Why is a good question.
Why did he do that?
that's one of those things, sometimes government policy happens. Basically, there's like a lot of little reasons
Okay, yeah.
and kind of, enough, the right people want it to happen, and so it happens. And that was kind of the case with Egypt.
Okay.
Part of the idea was to threaten British control of India.
Yes, yeah. He was obsessed with India. I know that. Yeah.
But part of the idea was to just kind of get a new colony for France. Part of the idea was that, if France could dominate the Mediterranean, that would, steer more like trade and commerce towards southern France.
Okay, yeah.
But there's kind of no one reason other than Napoleon really wanted to do it, and a lot of senior people in the French government, including a guy named Talleyrand, who was like this very famous sort of diplomat and statesman of this era. He also really wanted to do it. And so, you get two kind of strong-willed, really ambitious guys who want something to happen. And there's kind of all these little reasons for it to do it, so they did it. It almost kind of reminds me of like when the U.S. invaded Iraq, where it's like, why were they really doing that? There was like a bunch of different sort of excuses they gave, but at the end of the day, it was just that the government wanted to, and so they did. And the Egypt experience is very strange. Napoleon really sympathized with Islam, the religion, and read about it and found it very interesting. Actually debated converting to Islam, although he never actually did. He sort of it was funny, he would sort of imply to the Muslims that he had converted, but he never actually did.
That would have been the funniest thing if he did. Yeah, that would have been a big twist.
One of his generals actually did convert to Islam, but Napoleon himself did not. And the idea that the Egyptians were going to accept being ruled by these strange foreigners, especially after he had this fleet that brought him and his army down there, which then very quickly was destroyed by Lord Nelson at the Battle of the Nile.
Yes.
So the French are basically like marooned there. They're at the point where they're like, the guys in the supply train, they're giving weapons to because they just don't have enough men. There's a bubonic plague outbreak at one point. Napoleon brought all these like artists and scientists and writers with him, and they're doing all this interesting research. Because Egypt is kind of an unknown place at this time in history to Europeans. So there's this, the military expedition's very ugly, and there's this, all these abuses of civilians and a lot of death. But then there's this other side of the expedition that's actually, kind of high-minded almost, where they're, uncovering artifacts, and they're even like they're like studying the Nile water and identifying diseases that were present in the Middle East but not in Europe. So there's this other side of the expedition, and that's part of why there was so much mania for Egypt in 19th century Europe. It's because they then published their findings, and the people are like, oh my God, this is a fascinating place, and people are risking life and limb to get there just to see it.
I'm pretty sure. That's. I never knew this, but I recently got into like all this Egyptology stuff, and when they found Tutankhamun's tomb, apparently, I never knew this, in like 1922 or something, which essentially kickstarts like all of archaeology and like global. Everyone just became obsessed with it. I think the British had to get like a French license to do the dig there.
Oh, really? Huh.
Still, yeah. So it was still the French Archaeological Society, like running all the Egyptian things. So I'm pretty sure that Napoleonic stuff is the reason why like Lebanon and Syria were French speaking like later, or is that unrelated? Do you know?
Well, they were part of the Ottoman Empire, obviously. And after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the French still had this sort of fascination with the Middle East and this idea that, that's kind of naturally our turf. So they lobbied to get Syria and Lebanon placed under their I think they called it supervision, but they basically became colonies.
All right, so that's like a bit of a tenuous Napoleonic legacy. But like, what do you reckon is like the biggest takeaways that like how should we remember him like properly if we're doing a complex like true sort of picture of him? Like I'm particularly interested in like all the reforms and stuff. That was sounds like it was more French Revolution things, but then he implemented, I remember you saying he implemented a lot of it. It was like the envy of a lot of European, parliaments and stuff to see. Like, I didn't know about the equal rights, for example, for like peasants and nobility and things. Yeah, like how should we remember it properly?
Well, I mean, Napoleon himself said, I'm paraphrasing here, that the memory of his law code will still be in people's heads when the last of his battles is forgotten.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that that's really, the reason. I mean, obviously he's a very interesting character just because he did so many, his life was like stranger than fiction. But I think, if you're looking at why he was important, what's his legacy, why should people care about him? I think it is, like you say, these reforms, which, to be fair, this stuff was not stuff he invented. He was mostly implementing stuff or, finishing projects that had been started under the revolution. And, making sure that these ideas, by the time he came in, most people would think, this revolution business, it's maybe got a few years left. It's running out of steam, clearly. But because of Napoleon, it stuck around for another 15 years. Yeah. Enough time that, people grew up not knowing another system.
Yeah,
That system was not only in France because of Napoleon, it spread all over Western Europe. People got a taste of this kind of new way of doing things. And if you look at sort of the period after he's gone, people are obviously, by the end of his regime, people were sick of all the war. Yeah. People were sick of the way that he had to do everything himself and that, he didn't let, there was no collaboration in his government. It was, I'm in charge, I say how things go. And people were sick of that. They were sick of, the fact that he seemed unwilling or unable to make peace with the British, which was messing up all of international commerce for like the entire world. So people were very sick of him by the time he left. Yeah. But then you look at kind of, people in the decades, decade or so later, people are saying, hang on, a lot of stuff was actually better when he was around. Okay. Little things, the government ran better. It turns out, these aristocrats are coming back into power, and it turns out we don't really want or need them anymore. And, maybe Napoleon was right that the future belonged to kind of, the middle classes, the government bureaucrats, the bankers, the merchants. And those ideas of the French Revolution, a lot of that stuff was pretty radical and kind of bad, but, a lot of it was actually a pretty good idea. And maybe people got a little nostalgic for certain aspects of French rule. A lot of stuff, when the new, when Napoleon finally fell and the new government would come in, and they'd come in and they'd say, oh yeah, we're going back to the way things were. We don't want any of that French bullshit anymore. And then they would take a look at things. They'd go, actually, if we go back to the way things were, we'll have less money. Our government will have less power. Our army will be weaker. Maybe we actually don't want to go back to the way things were. And to me, that's his real legacy, is that, because of him, the French Revolution was not a flash in the pan. Yeah. It had a real, lasting, concrete legacy that has influenced the whole world. And so to me, in a lot of ways, he's a really monstrous figure. But maybe it's good that he existed because I think so. This legacy has done a lot for humanity. Yeah. Even little things, he helped public health. He was one of the first, his government was the first government to really push like vaccines and inoculation on people. Yeah. Before that, governments had been kind of afraid to do that because there was so much, as we've all seen in recent history, there's a lot of resistance to that stuff. So little things like that the Napoleonic government did stuck around. And so we got rid of, this kind of outlandish figure. He went into exile, not to cause problems for anyone ever again. That's probably a good thing in the long run. But it's good that he was out in the world for 15 years doing his thing. Yes, a lot of people died. As we discussed, that was not all his fault. That was all the great powers fighting. And, there are a lot of positive aspects to his legacy, even though in some ways, as I said, kind of a monstrous figure, and he did a lot of terrible things as well. So I think that's what makes him so interesting to me is that, you've got in some ways this kind of a dark figure, but there's these weirdly positive aspects to his legacy. I mean, he actually probably saved a lot of lives by building all these hospitals and clean water sources and getting people inoculated against smallpox, which was like one of his big causes.
Okay.
So very, as I said, as a person, he was very conflicted and had these kind of different parts of his nature that were at war with each other. And his legacy is the same way, where his legacy is very conflicted. And, in some ways, he's a forerunner of Hitler and Stalin with their secret police and their kind of cult of personalities and one-man rule.
Yeah.
But he's also the father of the modern state, which has improved people's lifestyles and made a lot of diseases and problems of poverty a thing of the past. So a guy with I've been studying him for 10 years. I'm still not totally sure what I think of him.
Yeah, it's very hard to have an opinion that people won't immediately try to shoot you down for, I think.
True.
What was I going to say? So, because I've sort of lived my entire life, I've never been in like a French, sphere of influence, really. I've never lived anywhere that there were like lots of French people. And just always, it's like notable that all of my French friends are like, no, you don't like understand, like you British essentially don't understand Napoleon. And I've always sort of thought about that. So like, because the British will say, or at least this is like just what I implicitly think, that they are like the progenitors of like the modern state. Like, is that right? Or is it actually, did they get...
Well, in some ways, yes. Okay. I mean, in some ways, yes. The British are, because as I said, Napoleon had this very personalized government.
Yeah.
It's like a pyramid where he's at the top and he's calling all the shots.
Yeah.
He's actually one of the last people to try to run an empire that way.
Yeah.
It's a very bad mix with kind of modern political and economic conditions, because one of the main things a government in this era, in the modern era, needs to be able to do is borrow money at a good interest rate.
Yeah.
And you do that by having a government that's transparent and accountable and has some kind of democracy, might be a strong word for it, but some kind of avenue where people outside the government can influence it. Because I wouldn't call Britain of that era a democracy at all. They had elections, but it was like 10,000 rich people voting. But it mattered that the British had this more kind of open, collaborative system. And that, I would say, is much more, in the political realm, that's much more the wave of the future than the Napoleonic government, which was in a lot of ways sort of the last hurrah of that, enlightened absolutist style of rule. So the British and the Americans as well, because by that time, of course, you got the U.S. as well. I think we're closer to the future when it came to the sort of legal structures of government, even if they weren't there yet when it came to like bureaucracy, governance, law, that kind of thing.
So it sort of sounds like you're saying the Americans and the British. I mean, the Americans were just the British until a few years before when Napoleon was born.
Right, and the American system is like almost totally, taken from the British political tradition. But anyway.
And they sort of had all they were closer to, like, as you say, the modern stuff with like how we do elections and so forth. But it sounds like a lot of because of corruption and like Whiggism and like all the posh toffs running everything, it wasn't like very efficient. And Napoleon's like pyramid scheme, or whatever you want to call it, was like, is that right? Like, could actually do more stuff on the ground?
Well, yes. And they didn't have, the British, I mean, this is, frankly, I would argue, still a weakness of the sort of Anglo-American political system, is that there's all this, because it's rooted in all these ancient, common law, rights of free Englishmen stuff. It sort of brings all this baggage from the Middle Ages with it. Whereas the French, their system, which also has its flaws, I should add, because they had this clean break with the revolution, they were allowed to sort of build a new political tradition out of, their just kind of experiences, particularly under Napoleon.
Yeah. And the French, because I remember another thing you said was that the French, a lot of like the French systems and institutions are like direct Napoleonic like legacy still in the French state now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Napoleonic, or a lot of them have their roots earlier,
Yeah.
but kind of they got their
Consolidate.
sort of right, exactly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, because I've just been every time I learn something about like the British Empire and like how pervasive it was, it's like crazy how it's sort of just turned a lot of our thinking into like a monoculture for essentially anything. And then I don't know, maybe I haven't traveled through Europe or anything extensively, but then maybe people have their eyes opened a bit when they go into like cross the border into France, and they're like, oh, they like have a different root of like the stuff that they do here than just British, like you say, British common law, medieval stuff. Yeah, fascinating. And then, like, why does he end up on Saint Helena again?
Well, so
we can finish
I mean,
that.
you've probably seen depictions of the invasion of Russia,
Yeah. I know how it's like
which
the precursor to Hitler's one and stuff like that.
complete disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, the French do win some battles early, but winning battles early does not determine who wins the war.
Right.
So the army, this army that had been built up through years of war and all these reforms that took place during the Revolution, is basically destroyed. And Napoleon comes back, and all his former enemies who had been kind of paying him lip service see that the army's destroyed and turn on him. And so between 1813, 1814, Napoleon is sort of scrambling to defend his empire.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that he's able to kind of hold on as long as he does. But eventually, 1814, he's got nowhere to run anymore. And the Allies are, on top of him, and he surrenders himself to them. And they put him in exile on an island off Italy, sort of not far from where he grew up, thinking that'll be his little domain where he can, have his little reforms and be in charge. Napoleon, but back in Europe, people in France are not so happy when the king comes back, because the famous slogan is the king learned nothing and forgot nothing. So he's basically just focused on getting revenge on people who had slighted his family during the Revolution.
Yeah.
People start getting nostalgic for Napoleon very quickly. He busts out of Elba, comes back, and basically everyone in France is like, why not let him be in charge again? And he basically marches to the capital. They keep sending people to arrest him, and who's going to pull the trigger on Napoleon? What French soldier is going to aim their musket at Napoleon and pull the trigger? And so he's basically able to retake charge, and then sequence of events that leads to the Battle of Waterloo. He's defeated again, and then they're like, okay, we're putting him somewhere he is not going to escape from. So the British find the most remote place in their empire, which is the island of St. Helena.
And I think if you go there now, his grave's still there, right? I think people go there.
Actually, they famously, he was originally buried on St. Helena, but I want to say it's early 1840s or late 1830s. The French government had been repeatedly asking the British to permit them to take the remains back to France, and finally, I want to say it's early 1840s. It might be late 1830s. The British finally relented, and there's this big pomp and circumstance, all this big ceremony returning Napoleon's remains to Paris. And that's sort of when the French begin to sort of make peace with his legacy, because it's a sort of a unifying national event. Even people who, maybe their parents didn't like Napoleon, but they're like, at least he did some good things. We can all agree on that. Yeah. And they put him in this beautiful tomb. Anyone who visits Paris should go see it. Yeah. And that's where he is today.
Yeah, that's so crazy to me. So like Paris and France have like all this. I just always compare it to like Rome and stuff. So like in Rome, there's all these like Arch of Titus and all these emperors, and then I think Napoleon like essentially copied that with like the Arc de Triomphe and like a lot of his architecture. So we have like early 1800s like pseudo Roman emperor. Not don't want to.
Oh, absolutely.
Flatten
He
his image
loved
completely,
ancient Rome.
But yeah.
mean, we talked at the very beginning how he was an Italian, and
Yeah.
he really saw himself as the successor of the
Oh
Romans.
yeah, of course, yeah, the Italian linkage. We can like cut off the like. I don't have to put out this whole thing, but I'm really curious about like if you have delved into at all, because I haven't listened to all of your more recent stuff. Any of like the Indian connection with some of the Napoleonic generals? Like, have you gone into any of that?
No, I would like to at some point talk about that. Especially, I've always been fascinated by Tipu Sultan, if you've ever heard of him.
Yes.
The Tiger
French
of Mysore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a really interesting figure, and it's just kind of a strange period of history where the French were really trying to link up with him. That's actually part of the reason they went to Egypt.
Oh, okay.
Because there was this idea that there's these figures, these Indian sort of anti-British figures that we could hook up with.
Yeah. There's another. I don't know if you've heard the name or if I'm pronouncing it right. It's called like General Avatabile or Avatabile. I don't know if he's a prominent one in like that you've heard of anyway in Napoleon's army. And I might have gotten the name wrong, but there was this guy, French Napoleonic general, who was in Pakistan as well. Like they're everywhere.
Huh.
And again, I'm just sort of waffling on here. You can, if you need to go somewhere, please tell me. I don't want to waste your time.
Oh, you're fine. No.
But it's a super nice discussion. I've become super obsessed with like Indian stuff, especially because I don't know if this is this Mirrored on your site?
Oh yeah, I know that book. Yeah.
And like a lot of his other stuff as well is just super like weird to think about because like it's just never advertised in the world that like the British Empire was like bankrolled by the Indian subcontinent, which I find really weird to think about. And then I don't like blame you or any of us really, but like we will say, oh yeah, French Revolution, 1780s, like Napoleon, 1800s, but then like the thing that really sort of impacted the world the most. I mean, I reckon you make a pretty good point that Napoleon and a lot of French stuff has big impact globally as well. But like, it's essentially like what the British are doing in India in like the late 1700s that like have, in my opinion anyway, the biggest like effects around the world because it just funds their empire. And it's just like, it's not something that most people have ever thought about really. They're always just, we think about the battles in Europe, but actually most of them were linked to things that were happening, with like Tipu Sultan and stuff like that. Well,
and even, to bring in, South America is a huge piece of this. Again, where does the gold for all this, we talk about how these European empires are building up
Spain,
in this period. Where does the money come from?
Yeah.
India, South America, Mexico.
Yeah.
That's,
Actually,
this all the influx of gold into the world economy in this era, is like the story behind everything that happened in this period.
Yeah. And like I looked into that a little bit as well. Apparently it's like more than half of all the Spanish silver came, and they like mostly got in monetary terms, it was mostly silver from the Americas, was like a Bolivian mine, which I never knew. I thought it was like Mexico or the gold and stuff they took from the Incas and the Aztecs and stuff. I wonder if Bolivians know that.
That's actually a big like tourists go and visit it.
Yeah.
It's a little grim. You think
It's
about all
very
the people
grim.
who died in that place. I mean, because it was run on slavery.
Yeah.
When it was at its height, of the indigenous people.
Yep, it was. And I think people also forget because Haiti and stuff is so, like, they just think of cyclones and, people in poverty there now. But yeah, as you were saying, it was like essentially the revolution there really pissed off the French because it was like a big revenue source for it. I think it was like the biggest Hispaniola or Saint Domingue, whatever you want to call it, was like the top revenue producer for a long time. I had forgotten that it was like, until 1800. It was like such a big thing. What were they growing? Was it like sugar plantations? Like what were they?
Sugar was the big thing. There was some coffee, some indigo, which is what they used to make blue dye.
Love the
But
indigo.
sugar was the big money maker, and the slavery, because sugar agriculture is like horrific. Before they mechanized it, it was like deadly because there's like snakes and crocodiles and
It's all
stuff.
wet,
Because you have to grow it like in the water, and guys running around with machetes cutting the cane.
Yeah.
One errant swing, and
Yeah.
there goes your arm. I mean, it was the conditions on those plantations. I think the average life expectancy of those sugarcane workers in Haiti was like 4 years.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. It was
No
cheaper to
wonder
get-
they rose up.
Yeah, it was. I think it was cheaper to import new people than to have them have children.
Right.
Because
so they just didn't care if they
didn't
died.
care. Yeah, but that's like super grim, but yeah, crazy. And then like the Louisiana being French. Always feel like New Orleans. Is your, just out of interest, is your the French side of your family, is it like French Canadian because of how close you are to like the Canadian border now, or is it just like...
Yeah, my ancestors. So after the British came, my ancestors moved. Well, you're South African. Same thing happened there. The British come, you move into the interior, and so they were kind of in like central and western Canada for a long time,
Okay, yeah.
and then they came down south and settled in the western U.S.
Very interesting.
They were actually back in the day, and you watch westerns. A lot of times there's like a French guy in the town, and that's there were actually a lot of French Canadians in the West.
Oh, okay, yeah. Like in the south, like in the southern parts as well, like in Texas.
Yeah, actually, my family moved from Canada to Arizona.
Wow.
Can't imagine what a transition that must have been
Oh,
before
yeah,
air
it's
conditioning.
so different. Yeah, really fascinating. I mean, I have in terms of racism, unfortunately, my family genetics is cooked because it's like German on my mum's side, and like at least no British that I know of, but like Dutch and French. So we're not looking too good there. And obviously like apartheid, like my parents grew up in that. Like it's really weird thing to think about. Yeah, but thank you like so much. This has been really, really nice chatting to you. I hope, like, I don't know what your schedule's like, or if you'd ever like to do something like this again. I'll have a more focused line of questioning then, and I'm just going to ramble on. So maybe if you're open to that, I would love to hone down on. I'll listen to some more of your stuff, and then anything that piques my interest. Maybe if I ever hear you going on about Tipu Sultan, we'll definitely
Right, yeah.
do something about that. But yeah, I'll let you, because it's like almost 8:30 or something there now. I'm sure you got things to do. So
Yeah, I got to eat dinner. But it's been great talking with you. I would definitely be open to doing this again sometime.
really nice, and it's nice hearing from someone that they can do it, make it their full-time thing. I don't know if I'll ever like get there, or if I want to do that or not, but it's cool. Like,
Well, be
finding-
patient. I mean,
Yeah,
it took me years to get there. So,
course,
that'd be my top advice. Be patient.
and like I'm not going to stop being like obsessed with it and want to find more people like you to talk about with. So that's
And when I
not
got
gonna go
started, that was kind of my thinking. I was like, hey, worst case scenario, I read a bunch of books and meet some interesting people, and it's more, an excuse to learn more about history.
Exactly. And I feel like you learn more about yourself as well, but I'm getting too philosophical now. I have all these reasons why everyone should be obsessed with history, but obviously they will never be. But there are
We
good
can try.
reasons.
We can try.
We can try. All right, man. Thank you so much, Everett, and have a good day. Enjoy who knows who'll win tomorrow. I'm not really too much on the Australian side. I don't mind that much. But are you going for the US?
I'm not
obviously?
going. No.
But like,
My dad will be
are
there.
you cheering for a side? You're being patriotic this World Cup.
I've never been big on the American team before. They've never been very fun to watch.
No.
So I usually root for someone else.
Yeah.
This year might be different though. They've played pretty
look
well
pretty
so
good.
far this year.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Anyway, have a lovely evening, and thank you so much.